Democrats and Republicans don't agree on much, but they have found a common enemy: people who put pineapple on pizza. And Section 230. Basically, Section 230 states that sites like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook aren't liable for what their users post. So TikTok can't get sued when I post that people who like pineapple on pizza don't have a soul, but I could for slander. The left hates it because it means that Facebook can let misinformation stay, and the right hates it because when Facebook decides to remove it, they can't spread misinformation. In the decades since the creation of Section 230, the landscape of the internet has completely changed. I can post just about anything: pictures of my cat, what I ate for lunch, and of course, vaccines are government trackers. And now that everything finds its way online, there are a few tools to control the deluge of content. With our previous misinformation in chief, Section 230 has once again entered the chat. Section 230 is the most important law protecting internet speech. Changing or removing this law could weaponize control of social media as we know it. To better understand this law and why so many people want to change it, let's explore the background, impacts, and implications of what cybersecurity law professor Jeff Kossoff describes as the 26 words that created the internet. Section 230 was created over 25 years ago when the internet was brand new. A lot has changed since then, but Section 230 hasn't, and many lawmakers on both sides are fighting for revisions. First, let's examine the history of Section 230, and second, the changes to it that have been proposed. According to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Section 230 was created as a response to a pair of conflicting court cases in the early 1990s. In 1991, CompuServe, an online service that hosted forums, was sued when a columnist posted defamatory remarks about a CompuServe competitor. The court found that CompuServe could not be held liable for these comments because CompuServe did not review any of the content before it was published onto the forums. However, in 1995, a case emerged involving Prodigy, a similar web services company. Because Prodigy removed some comments for offensiveness and bad taste, the court found that Prodigy was now responsible for all postings that made it onto the site. In 1996, Section 230 was created as an amendment to the Communications Decency Act, stating that a provider of an interactive computer service could not be held liable for third-party content. The discussion to revise or even revoke Section 230 has become more and more popular. A 2017 article published by the Fordham Law Review argues that the law should be changed to require sites who are aware of unlawful uses of their site to take reasonable steps to address it. The Washington Post on May 14, 2021 states, former President Donald Trump began calling for the removal of Section 230 after Twitter flagged two of his tweets about mail-in voting with a warning that read, "Get the facts about mail-in ballots." Biden revoked Trump's executive order in May. The order has had no effect on Section 230, but it did raise the law's public profile, and many lawmakers on both sides began to discuss revising the law. Democrats call it regulation, Republicans call it censorship. PolitiFact on March 1st, 2020 calls it speech protective, meaning that more content rather than less makes it onto platforms. This objective was baked into the law. But Section 230 carries two impacts that show its imperfections: inadequate moderation and political weaponization. There is no incentive for platforms to remove content containing hate speech or harassment, and it is difficult to monitor every single post made onto a platform. Brookings on July 7, 2020 states, platforms have to rely heavily on algorithms to curate content. And algorithms make mistakes. Further requirements to track posts would increase cost, and many sites would have to charge consumers an admissions fee. NPR on May 14, 2021 states, a group known as the Disinformation Dozen is responsible for more than 65% of shares of anti-vaccine misinformation onto social media sites. Many of the 12 have been spreading disproven medical claims and conspiracies for years. Some of their claims range from denying the fact that COVID exists, claiming false cures are in fact the way to solve COVID and not vaccination, denouncing vaccines, and accusing doctors of being motivated by other factors when recommending vaccines. Both political parties are trying to weaponize Section 230 for their own political gain. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that Section 230 needs reform. However, they have very different ideas as to how that should be done. Business Insider states that Republicans want to revise or revoke Section 230 in order to fight the alleged censorship of conservative users online. Representative Paul Gosar proposed the Stop the Censorship Act, where sites can only remove content that directly violates the law. However, the New York Times states that Democrats want more regulation in order to remove more content associated with hate speech, illegal drug sales, and violence. Senator Brian Schatz proposed the Platform Accountability and Consumer Transparency Act, which would require platforms to transparently disclose how they moderate content. Section 230 is the most important law protecting internet speech. Changing or removing this law will vastly change the landscape of the internet. The ongoing debates surrounding Section 230 highlight two key implications. Predictably, a major outcome of eliminating Section 230 would be an unprecedented wave of litigation. Brookings on July 7, 2020 states, "The wake left behind will be chaotic at best. Users will challenge platforms' decisions to leave up or take down content, ban or restrict users, and mark posts as inaccurate or disputed. Different courts are likely to come up with different conclusions, a legal nightmare for global sites with global rules. Even smaller sites, such as local journalism outlets or startup platform firms, will be forced to disable user comments to avoid the risk of liability." Engadget on January 31st, 2020 states, "If Section 230 were killed, large chunks of the internet will become unusable. Platforms would have to use extreme moderation to curate content. For platforms that lack the means to heavily moderate, Section 230 is their digital life jacket." Repealing or replacing Section 230 can also put internet platform employees in danger. The Texas Intellectual Property Law Journal states, Republican Senator Josh Hawley proposed a bill called Ending Support for the Internet Censorship Act. Under this act, companies are rewarded for unbiased moderation, granting them certain protections. But there are two sides to every coin. By publicly disclosing that an employee acted in a politically biased manner, they now have the grounds to fire that employee. The journal goes on to explain, this means that for sites who fear they may lose their protections, can now publicly name and shame the employee to avoid risk of litigation, which can be extremely dangerous for the employee who was tossed aside. Today we discuss the background, impacts, and implications of Section 230. This law is the reason that social media sites and online platforms are able to operate the way that they do. Changing or removing this law will vastly change the landscape of the internet and how social media sites and online platforms work. Either way, pineapple does not belong on pizza.